They were once untouchable. Their faces filled our television screens, movie posters, and magazine covers. Their names were spoken in every home, as if they would last forever. And in those moments of peak fame, no one ever stopped to ask what happens when the spotlight finally turns away. You see, fame doesn't leave loudly. It leaves quietly, and often, cruelly. It slips away like a shadow at dusk, leaving behind a silence that can be deafening for those who once lived in the constant roar of applause. This is the story of what happens after the world stops watching. Take Macaulay Culkin, for example. In 2026, he's 45 years old. But once, he was the most famous child on the entire planet. Before he even turned 10, he had earned more money than most people will ever see in a lifetime. We all remember him as the clever, mischievous kid from Home Alone. But behind the laughter and the holiday joy was a boy growing up far too fast. Crushed by immense pressure, family conflict, and public expectations he never, ever asked for. The weight of being a global phenomenon became too much to bear. After years of stepping away from Hollywood, he now lives a much quieter life. A life where he has consciously chosen personal peace over public fame. He found his happiness not in the scripts he was handed, but in the life he wrote for himself. Think about Brendan Fraser. At 57, he's a symbol of resilience. But there was a time when he was everywhere, the action hero, the comedic lead. And then, suddenly, he was nowhere. He was suffering from severe physical injuries from doing his own stunts, battling emotional loss, and facing a silent, unspoken blacklisting from the very industry he had given so much to. For years, he was gone. Then, his return shocked the world. It was a powerful reminder to audiences everywhere that true talent never really disappears. It just waits for its moment to shine again. And what about Amanda Bynes? Turning 40, her journey has been a difficult one. As a child, she made millions of people laugh. She was a comedic genius on Nickelodeon. But when the cameras stopped rolling, her private mental health battles became public headlines. Her struggles weren't treated with compassion. They were treated as tabloid fodder. She was forced to step away completely, making the brave choice to prioritize her own healing over the demands of Hollywood. She chose to save herself, even if it meant walking away from the career she had built since she was a little girl. Then you have someone like Daniel Radcliffe. At 37, he made a very rare and incredibly wise decision early in his career. After becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the world as Harry Potter, he consciously turned away from the safety of blockbuster films. Why? To protect his own mental health? He chose strange, risky, and unconventional roles, specifically so he would not be trapped by the expectations that came with his immense fame. He understood, even at a young age, that being defined by one thing, no matter how successful, could become a prison. Even legends aren't immune. Mark Hamill, now 75, survived decades of being defined by a single, iconic role. For so long, he was Luke Skywalker, and nothing else. But he quietly and patiently rebuilt his career, becoming one of the most celebrated voice actors of his generation. He didn't fight the shadow of his most famous character. He simply outlasted it, until the world finally recognized the incredible breadth and longevity of his talent. These stories reveal a truth that few in the entertainment world want to admit. Fame doesn't reward endurance. It tests it. It pushes people to their absolute limits, and then asks for more. Not all stories of a fall from grace end in silence. Some turn into battles fought in the full, unforgiving glare of the public eye. Britney Spears, at 44, became the most visible and heartbreaking example of what happens when fame completely removes control from a person's own life. For years, she was trapped in a conservatorship, her every move controlled. While millions of people watched, judged, and speculated, her struggle for freedom became a global movement, forcing the world to question the deeply flawed and often predatory systems that govern the entertainment industry and how it treats its biggest stars. Her fight wasn't just for herself. It was a fight for autonomy that resonated with millions. And then there's Johnny Depp. At 63, he's on a path of reconstruction. He went from being one of Hollywood's highest paid and most beloved actors 2 years of brutal courtroom dramas, intense public judgment, and industry exile. The machine that had once celebrated him turned its back on him. He's now in the process of rebuilding his career, but on his own terms, largely outside the traditional studio system that once defined his success. Sometimes, walking away is the most powerful statement of all. Jeanette McCurdy, now 34, shocked her fans by walking away from acting entirely. In her book, she revealed the deep emotional cost of child stardom, the abuse she endured, and the identity crisis it created. She chose raw, painful honesty over the applause and paychecks. And in doing so, she found a different kind of power, the power of her own truth. Even the baddest man on the planet wasn't invincible. Mike Tyson, at 60, has lived 100 lives in one. He had it all, the fame, the fortune, the fear of his opponents. And then he lost it. He lost his fortune, his reputation, and his sense of direction. His collapse was as spectacular as his rise, but he slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt his life, proving that a catastrophic fall doesn't have to be the final chapter. He found wisdom in his wreckage. Each one of these stories, though unique, carries the exact same message. Fame is a magnifying glass. It magnifies everything: the success, yes, but also the mistakes, the insecurities, and the pain. What ties all of these lives together isn't the money or the awards, it's survival. Some rebuilt their lives quietly, far from the cameras. Some returned loudly, demanding to be seen on their own terms. Some disappeared by choice, finding peace in anonymity. And some are still out there, searching for that peace. But all of them learned the same lesson, the hard way. Fame is temporary. Identity must be permanent. When the cameras finally shut off, when the roar of the crowd fades to a whisper, and when the world moves on to the next shiny thing, the real fight begins. It's the fight to learn who you are without the constant echo of applause. And so these stories, these lives, force an uncomfortable but essential question onto every single one of us watching right now. If the world stopped clapping for you tomorrow, would you still know who you are? Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the human side of fame. We'll see you in the next one. Remember when the applause for your favorite child star just stopped? For some, fame doesn't disappear in a flash. It slowly erodes, leaving behind a quiet confusion. Take Haley Joel Osment. By 2026, he's 38. He moved millions to tears before most kids even learned multiplication. But as he grew up, the industry just moved on. It forced him to redefine success not as a superstar, but as a working actor, choosing steady gigs over screaming fans. Then there's Raven-Symoné, now 40. She basically carried a whole network on her shoulders, becoming one of Disney's most iconic faces. But behind that infectious laugh was burnout, immense pressure, and a total loss of privacy before she was even an adult. She eventually stepped away, came back on her own terms, and now finds happiness in producing, far from the relentless spotlight. And what about Jonathan Taylor Thomas? Now 45, he was on top of the world, and then just walked away. He chose education, he chose privacy, he chose himself over endless roles. His story proves that sometimes, the bravest move isn't to hang on, but to let go before the industry takes everything from you. These stories show us that disappearing isn't always a defeat. For some, it's a choice. But then there are those whose faces we never forgot, even as their private lives told a much darker story. Macaulay Culkin's journey didn't end when he was left home alone. It fractured, took decades of self-reflection, battles with addiction, and a long, hard road to healing for him to rebuild and reshape his life. Drew Barrymore, now 51, was in rehab before most of us were in middle school. She survived addiction, public humiliation, and emotional abandonment to become one of the most respected and beloved figures in entertainment today. Corey Feldman, at 55, has lived through incredible success and devastating loss. He's been one of the most vocal about the hidden dangers of child fame, fighting to reclaim his own narrative from the shadows of the industry. And Shia LaBeouf, now 40, his struggles have been public. We've seen him unravel under the pressure, cycling between brilliant talent, controversy, and attempts at redemption. He's become a living example of how unresolved trauma follows fame, no matter where you go. These lives show us that surviving fame doesn't always look like a Hollywood ending. Sometimes, it just looks like staying alive long enough to heal. For some, the only way forward was a complete reinvention. Look at Robert Downey Jr., now 61. He fell harder than almost anyone. Addiction nearly erased his career entirely. But one opportunity, one single chance, turned everything around and made him one of the most successful actors of his generation. Winona Ryder, now 55, vanished after a public scandal. The headlines were brutal. Yet, she returned decades later, not just working, but respected and resilient, proving that time can heal a reputation far faster than tabloids can destroy it. Miley Cyrus, at 34, grew up in front of the entire world. She had to shed her child star image publicly, painfully, and often controversially. It was a messy, public battle to finally gain control over her own identity as an artist. And maybe the most powerful story of all, Kiwi Kwan, now 55. He didn't disappear because he failed. He disappeared because there were no opportunities for him. He spent years working behind the scenes, never giving up. And then, he returned to global recognition, reminding us all that the longest, quietest journeys can lead to the strongest comebacks. What makes these stories so powerful isn't just nostalgia, it's the truth they reveal. Fame doesn't protect you. It exposes you. It doesn't promise happiness. It tests your resilience. Some stars rebuilt their lives in silence. Some fought their battles in the public eye. Some never came back. And some are still just trying to figure out who they are after the world stopped watching. The real shock isn't how many of them fell. It's how few were ever prepared for the fall. So as you think about these stories, don't just ask who succeeded, ask who survived. All of these lives, though so different, are connected by one invisible thread. They all got sudden, massive attention before their own identities were even fully formed. Fame came early, it came fast, and it came without an instruction manual. And when it left, it didn't take the pressure with it. Some were praised too soon. Some were judged too harshly, and others were just forgotten without a warning. But every single one of them carried that weight long after the cameras stopped rolling. What we saw as success was often just survival behind closed doors. A place where the applause fades into a deafening silence and you have to rebuild your entire sense of purpose from scratch. Their stories aren't really about losing fame. They're about losing direction and then learning, slowly and painfully, how to find it again in a world that has already moved on. And that's why these stories still matter so much in 2026. Because fame didn't just shape who they became, it revealed what happens when admiration replaces guidance, when money arrives before maturity, and when your identity is defined by millions of strangers. Some rebuilt quietly, some returned stronger, some chose privacy over applause, and some are still searching for peace. Their journeys are a powerful reminder that being famous once doesn't mean you'll be fulfilled forever, and disappearing doesn't always mean you've failed. If this story made you look at celebrity life differently, like this video and subscribe for more real stories behind the public faces. And share this with someone who still believes that fame is the finish line, because sometimes it's only the beginning of the hardest part.